Hi and welcome to another episode, and what we've got here is a Yamaha MU80. Can we get past the glare maybe? Because it has this problem. Dun dun dun, battery low, I'm sure you can see that. There we go. So, let's try to solve it. First things first, turn it off. Take the power out the back by unplugging it at the wall first, of course, and then undo all the screws. There's two on top, and then there's two here, and then there's these two. You can ignore these are funny, these ones, you'll see in a minute. And then there's the three at the back. Now keep them separated because that one is different than those two, and of course those ones are different from the four that keep the front plate on. So I'll mess around undoing them. You don't need to see me doing them all, but I'll get my little blue mat out and then I'll take the lid off and you can see how to get that out. So as you can see, I've messed around taking all the screws out and I've put them in a way that I'm going to remember for later where they go. So obviously the top, while it's facing me, the back ones while it's facing me, and then the bottom ones while it's facing me. Now this is the bit where you've got to be a bit careful, and the bit where you're taking these screws out, try to remember that there is buttons and things on the front, so be careful because you don't want to be resting all them. So you slide this out from the front. There's a few little springy bits, there's that bit and there's that bit, so be aware of them when you put it back together again because you don't want to jam it all in the wrong place. And then we'll lay it on its lid. The base comes off, hence why you got to do the screws at the back of it as well. So put that somewhere safe, but this is the bit I said at the beginning. Two screws just randomly sitting there. I'm assuming that's for some kind of mounting plate, or is it, you know, if you lose a screw you've got a chance of some backups. But anyway, let's put that out of the way for now. Then we need to get the motherboard out because we want to get to the battery, which is obviously sitting here at the back. Here is all the sockets. There's the battery. We have got the front panel to worry about. The thing is that I would not recommend undoing the plugs on it, because this one you probably can get away with, that one you probably can get away with, but these type are really awkward and can be, well, really awkward. So just be careful. You don't want to overstretch any of the cables. But we should be fine when it comes to attacking the battery down here. Now there's some more screws. There's one here, one over here, one here, and one here, and then this sneaky one, you can find it, it's just here. So there's three near the front and two at the back. Undo them, put them somewhere you can remember where's where. So in fact what I'm going to do is move my case screws a little bit lower down so I know where they go for later, but then I know where these are. So this is the back, and let's start off doing them. But as always, I'm not going to waste your time. As you can see, I've took all the screws out, rotated it a little bit to make it easier to get at. So hold the front panel, because you've got to stop that from bashing around. Hold the heatsink, because that should take the weight of the motherboard, let's call it. But you've got to be careful the underside of the motherboard, because where the screws go in, there's basically built-in posts, and you don't want to scrape the underside of the motherboard because it could really mess everything up. There is components in there, so lift it up and then sort of carefully lift it out at an angle. Get past all the bits on the side of the base, and as we can see, there's all fun stuff on the bottom which we don't want to scrape up. So grow a third hand and move the base out of the way. My thanks goes to PCBWay for sponsoring this episode. Currently they have their 8th anniversary promotion. They're offering free coupons, sales and a lucky draw. One of the things they're excited about right now is their new OEM service, which means they'll put your creation together for you using your designs with the great services they've always provided. These ranging from PCB assembly, 3D printing, CNC machining, and many more. Your first order could start as little as $5. I said the base all the time there. That's actually the lid, isn't it? It's actually sort of in upside down. Yes, because that's how it actually lives inside while you're using it. So yes, be careful of the lid as you're sliding it out. Right, anyway, that's just semantics. What we need to get at is the battery bit. So let's move it round again so we can have a good look at it. Now you might notice that well, it might not do with the shininess of the light on the camera, but basically the positive side of the battery is up facing. That goes to a connector that then goes down the back to 2 posts. And then if we carefully flip it over, we'll be able to see where the negative part goes to. So these 2 pins here are the positive and this is the negative. So we need to desolder these 3 points. But what I want to point out is that when we put on our new battery holder, because that's what we're going to be installing, it doesn't really matter which side that the positive bit connects to, because actually it's all one plane and then leads to this post here, or this pin here. So, because what we're going to be installing is this thing, and if we could see through the motherboard, it'd be like that. So the little pin there is going to this pin here, so it'd be that way. So let's flip it over again so we got an idea of where it's going to go for later on, just so we're 100% sure. Basically there's a jumper and the fat end of the battery holder goes near the jumpers. That's all we need to remember. We can only go into one of them, but it doesn't really matter which one you decide when it comes to installing it, which one's good for you. It might be a thing if you're left-handed or right-handed. So again, let's flip it over so we're ready for some desoldering. So it's time to get the desoldering gun out. Before I get the desoldering gun up and ready and hot and everything, as I say, that point, and that point. So these 3 here I'm going to be doing. I may well show it, but you're not going to hear it because, my goodness, the desoldering station does make a lot of noise, and where it sits for me is directly below the microphone, so maybe not so great for you. So let's get on with it. I know I sped that bit up, but what you'll have seen me do is use some liquid flux and use some new solder and use the soldering iron as a solder gun. I don't know if it's a highly recommended way of doing it, but I haven't got a lot of space. I can't have my desoldering gun and my soldering iron out all at the same time. So I find that adding fresh solder and then using the desoldering gun all at the same time fix that problem. If I'm doing something drastically wrong by the people that know far more than me, please let me know. But I can't see it doing much harm because all I'm doing is adding new solder. I'm not trying to make a new contact. I'm just adding new solder to make it easier to suck away. Saves the job. A little bit lazy. As they say, if you want something done fast, ask a lazy person. Right, so that's done. Came out first go. Be careful with adding the heat though, because this is a battery, but it came out really easy. I had my desoldering gun set to 355 degrees Celsius. That seems to work best for me on most things. So let's get on with adding the new battery compartment, which I'm going to reach around and get without burning myself. There we go. So what we're trying to do is grow a third hand again. Let's flip it over. As I say, it shouldn't really matter which side you actually get the pin in, but it might need a little bit of bending to make it sort of just fall in. There we go. Oh, it was a minute ago. I recommend, from what I'm trying to do here, I'm going to try to line that one up first and then bend this one if need be to slot in. Or is it the other angle even better? No, it doesn't really make a difference. Let's try to do it this way. It does need a little bit of adjustment to get it to go in. Come on now. I bet someone else will find this so much easier than I. I think I've bent it a bit too much now. I was wrong. It's the positive one that's easier to get in first. Bend the negative one, because the positive leg's longer, so it's easy to get that going first. There we go. So that's nice and flat. I just need it to stay there while I get some fresh solder on. So let's try to find my roll of Captain Tape so it'll hold into place while we're soldering it. Got the tape put on, so let's gently flip it over. Dun, dun, dun. So we've got this point and this point to be doing. So a little bit of flux to put on. And again, this is what you could do with growing three hands. Solder with a L, solder, and then put a bit on. And what I'm going to do is press from the underside to make sure that it is actually flat. There we go. And then some over here. Maybe a little bit more, so it takes. There we go. Again, press from the underside to make sure it's actually flat. It should be because of the other bit being flat. And that should be it. So let's turn the soldering iron off so I don't burn myself. Now it's time to screw it all back together again. You saw how to unscrew it, so I'll not bore you screwing it all back together. You'll just see it, ta-da, as being all in one. So it's hopefully soldered. Looks like it is. Gonna flip it over, put the battery in, and take the tape off, of course. We don't need that anymore. Now the style of battery I have purchased, and it appears to be the correct one, is a 2450. Doesn't necessarily have to be Duracell, but I recommend you buy a decent make. That's up to you to make a informed decision. But as I say, I'd decide on getting one that stuff. Actually, it'd say in the packet you've got to cut your way into this, so I'll just do that. So a CR2450, and you put it in this way, so you won't be able to see the positive sign pointing upwards. And make sure you put it in properly, so that way first, so that there's a little bit black there, and then push down. There we go, nice good and click, and that's the battery in. So fingers crossed everything's fine. I'm going to, do we risk putting the power in now when it's like this? I think we can be safe enough to maybe do it, because the power button is there before we actually screw everything up. So let's screw everything back together again, I should say. So I'm going to hold it like this, but with the power in. Let's get everything over it. There we go. Press the power. It's upside down at the moment, obviously, but no complaining about the battery. So there we go. So turn it off, flip it back out, undo the power, flip it back over again, and clean off the flux, because we don't want that left forever. So you get your little container to hold some isopropyl in. Get your Q-tip or cotton bud, whichever way you want to call them. Clean off this area, because you don't want flux hanging around forever. That should be good enough. Time we get it rebuilt and everything, it will dry off, so there's no worry about short circuits. So you've seen it be unscrewed, so I'm just going to screw it back together again. But as I'm getting to the front plate, I'm going to show you the bit of where you should be a bit careful about putting it back on again. So a little bit weird the way that this goes together, isn't it? This is actually the lid, so got to be careful. Try to slide it in without banging everything around. Be careful the underside of the circuit board or the motherboard. Sort of just hold it a bit up. There we go. That's where that is. I turn it around this way so that I can see what I'm doing, and line up the motherboard a little bit better again. There we go. So let's try to remember which screws were which. So these screws here are the ones that are for the motherboard, so I'm going to put them in. As I always say, anti-clockwise, counterclockwise at first until you feel it crunching or clicking, then go a bit. Don't screw it all the way down at first, because you want nice tension going across the board, and do them sort of crosswise. It helps line everything up, and it also helps make sure that you're not putting too much pressure in the one spot. So again, backwards, and screw that in. Not all the way at first. Do that for the rest of them until you're comfy that they're all in, and then when they're all in, tighten them all bit by bit until that they're finally finished. I think it goes without saying, you know, just be careful with the screws. Don't go mad tightening them. You don't want to break the PCB. So let's get the bottom of this on now, and of course it goes this way around because the connectors are at the back. So be careful with the front panel, you don't want to end up breaking that. I would actually try to remember which screws go where, and obviously it's these ones, that one goes there. Again, backwards at first and a little bit in. And I recommend getting this one in first, these ones in first, because it'll help line up the holes across the bottom. So I'm going to mess around screwing these back in. In fact, I'll do it off camera. That's the back screws on. Now we need to gently line this up. This is the bit where I mean you've got to be careful of this bit here, and this silvery bit here, and this silvery bit here. You need to make sure that pops under. And you want the front faceplate to actually go over the top of the base, and there we go. And we've got that way. So I put these ones in. Basically I'm putting the bottom ones in first, and I'll come back for the ones that go on top. It's plugged in with some power, turn it on, and it works straight in, no complaining about the battery. So there's a good fix, and it means for the next time if I need to replace the battery, or I sell this on and someone else does it, it's dead easy to replace the battery instead of trying to solder one of these in and out all the time. I hope that's been of some interest to some people out there who've got these. For those that don't, even so, I wish all of you would come down and click the Discord links and the Patreon links. If you don't want to do that, please click the subscribe and the like buttons and notification bells. But as always, happy gaming.